I brewed beer myself as a home brewer for a number of years and went through many batches of bad beer that was undrinkable in the early days. I think that happens with most people. Once you get the understanding of the basic processes, which is, clean, 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 and clean again, I think that you have an opportunity to actually make decent beer.
We probably are going to spend 75% of your brewing time cleaning. I mean, that's a fact. It takes us about 2 hours to clean the tank. We use very high-end pumps. They pump very hard, and we can get those tanks up to about 178 degrees to sanitize, and we spin a multi-chemical process, and we do 3 chemicals in a 4-step process with severe rinsing in between each one. And then we foam out our tanks, and then we scrub them out, and then I sanitize them again after we build them, and we pressurize them with CO2, because nothing can grow under 15 pounds of CO2 on this planet, and if it can, it deserves to live. We make sure everything's drained out, and we let them sit and let them stay under pressure before we transfer any work into that tank before we pitch.
Basically, beer's water, malt, hops, and yeast. 4 ingredients, other things to flavor it, stuff like that, fruits or whatever, maybe adjunct things we call them. The malt lends the sugars which become fermented. That lends the sweetness or the maltiness or the color to the beer. The hops lend the herbal or floral aromas and the bitterness to the beer.
The yeast ferments the sugars down to alcohol. You have many, many different strains of yeast. We use a very particular kind that is very popular in most Michigan ales.
Barley is like a whole grain kernel. In the malting process, what they do is they basically germinate that seed until it sprouts, and then they stop it with heat and dry it back out. As they come naturally, if they stopped it right there, you'd get like a pale or a light color beer. If they kiln it or they heat it longer, those sugars inside the barley will roast and become caramelized, and that's what gives us the colors in our beer.
First, we start with our grains. We get all of our grains weighed out, and depending on the recipe, it depends on the grains we use. So once we get those all weighed out, we get those mashed in with a hot water in our mash tun, and we let that mash for about an hour, and then we do a process called vorlofting, which is rinsing out any sugars and basically rinsing sugar water with sugar water. And then we go through that process and we boil what is called the wort that we get from the mash for at least an hour, sometimes longer depending on the beer. And we get down to a very particular gravity, transfer it into a tank, pitch our yeast, and begin our fermentation. We CO2 our beers for about 24 hours, and we make sure that they hit a very particular CO2 rating, and then we hook up to the tank and we basically pump CO2 in, and as it relieves, it fills up with CO2 so that no air gets in and pushes the beer into a keg.
Our challenge as the brewers is to try to make something that people like, but they don't know they like, or they never had it that way before, or whatever. And that's getting harder to do because there are so many of us. Sooner or later, every style is going to be made by somebody, but seemingly we can find something like a windmill cookie from the company across the street, and we put that in a beer, and you get it's a brown ale or dark beer. It's got residual sweetness from the lactose sugars and the milk sugars in the cookie that are not fermentable, so it stays a little sweet in the glass. People are throwing whatever they can in beer, Fruit Loops or Fruity Pebbles. Who knows? Make it weird. Typically, our customers come around to this eventually is they want to seek out those hoppier beers. So the IPAs style India Pale Ale, historical name for this hoppy beer, tends to lead the whole craft brewing category by about 2 to 1.
I mean, we mainly do anywhere from pale ales to stouts. Our pale ales are usually a lot lighter, more malt based. We try to do a little less hops until we get into our IPAs, which is where they're going to be a lot more hop based. You're going to get your aromatics and your bitters, and then we got our porters and our stouts that we make a lot of as well, and those are going to be the sweeter, roastier ones, a lot less hop content, and that's what they want. And they're usually going to be a little bit higher alcohol content as well, and those are the ones we usually make.
Another phenomenon is kind of the aging your higher gravity or higher alcohol beers in barrels that once had bourbon in them.
Barrel aging is incredibly simple. It's making sure you get your hands on good barrels from a reliable source that is consistent, and then we add an almost finished beer and let it age for a particular amount of months. And we will check it after a certain amount of time, and that's when we start to develop and we know when we're about to finish it off, carb it up, and serve it to the public. That'll add an oakiness, a smokiness to it that you just can't get by just adding wood chips.
Well, as you may or may not know, Hudsonville's somewhat of a fickle community and set in their ways for many years as a dry town. And we moved in here in January of 2012, so just over 4 years ago. And it really took, some getting used to, I'd say, for the community and for the residents of Hudsonville. One, they don't really know it's here. This building's always been here, but it's been something else, so they don't look at it as a restaurant or a pub or whatever. So we had to kind of retrain them a little bit that they could stop here and have a beer on the way home if they wanted to. And the ones that did, I think, were like, man, that was awesome. I'm almost home and I can have a beer and it's right next door, whatever. Whereas before they might have gone downtown or Grand Rapids or into Granville to some other, that was the next closest stops, So that was a big thing. And we still had people that would come in and they would stay for a beer and then leave quick, or they would say, I'm afraid I would see somebody from my church at the bar. And I said, well, if you see somebody from your church at the bar, then they're at the bar too. So you might as well say hi and shake hands and say, what's going on with you and your family,
I even go out in public and I'll just have like one of my t-shirts on, and I got people asking me questions about it. They want to know where we are. It's always weird because you're like, why are they, oh yeah, I'm wearing a t-shirt.
We've had a couple opportunities to help people with a few different fundraiser projects where we've made beer and had an event and donated back a portion of those sales to these people. It's a reward of satisfaction to know that you were able to help somebody and to see people have a good time, and then to see them here for a good cause. One other thing we do as a byproduct of the brewing process, we call them spent grains, just barley that's been malted and then kilned, and then we took some of the sugars out of it. Local farmer comes and picks up a few hundred pounds a week at least, and he feeds them to his cattle. And it's not just filler, it's been tested to be like 20% protein yet, so he's getting some value in basically free food product. All he has to do is pick it up here, but he feeds it to his cattle.
What does it take to be a head brewer? It's finding a niche, finding the right brewery. In all honesty, you got to find a beer you like to make first. And that's the big one. If you like lagers, you're gonna have to go find a lager house. They don't have those in Michigan. Then you gotta basically get in, find a job, start. I started part-time. I started part-time working 2 jobs. And I was working at a liquor store, serving craft beer and selling craft beer. It was all craft beer is what we sold. And so I was constantly talking about it. I ran into a gentleman that was working here, helping out here, and said they needed help. I said, well, I could use some extra work. And this is what happened. My favorite part is the look on people's faces at the end. I mean, this is a super hard job. There's a lot involved. You're not just doing one thing, you're doing everything, and it's part of it. But you learn start to finish. You learn what to do, which is always great because at least once a week I'm learning something totally different and new, which is awesome because that makes your job exciting every week.
I think a lot of people would be probably surprised to know that, I don't really pay myself here. So it's kind of, I'm looking at it as like an investment to the future. We keep trying to grow this operation with the cash flow that we have, or the capital investment that we've made and that some other people have made to help us. But going forward, we hope that the investment will pay off, in the small business success and things like that. I mean, we really are really confident in that. So, but I would say, if you got a dream, follow it. So chase it and work hard at it. But that might mean 12, 14-hour days. So whatever it takes, miss your kids for a couple years, and then the rewards will be there at the end. So.